What would be the main goal of a secret police force? You got to ask yourself that question right now based on things that are happening here in the United States. And in my opinion, based on historical evidence, the main goal would be to prevent dissent. You got to keep people from dissenting against the approved narrative, the approved agenda, the approved government trajectory as to which path we are currently on. And that is what I think is occurring right this second. I think we need to be very careful about how we approach our future here when it comes to dealing with a secret police force. Now, back in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, when a lot of this was happening in places like Germany, they were using citizens to denounce each other in order to get most of their information and their data. And then they were using techniques like gaslighting, which we'll talk about here in a second, in order to make people uncomfortable and afraid to the point where they would rat on their fellow citizens in order to give those secret police forces more of the information that they required. Now, here's what I want to say really quickly regarding that. I actually made a video going into deep dive details about any of that historical evidence I just mentioned. The problem is that after I made it twice, I realized that either way, by posting that video, I'd probably get myself into a little bit of trouble, and I want to maintain this channel's existence for as long as possible. So I apologize for not being able to release that exact video. But just so you have an idea, what is the definition of secret police? The definition of secret police is a police force working in secret against a government's political opponents. Now, just keep in mind what we have going on here in the United States. We have the ATF going door to door conducting warrantless investigations. We have the FBI saying that there's a good possibility of some kind of event happening here in the near future and that there's a lot of threats going on regarding something like a civil war going on the internet. Understand there's only one side of the equation that's going to be considered dissenters when it comes to a lot of this activity. And now you have the IRS expanding and adding more agents and growing their enforcement force and also adding more firearms and ammunition to their arsenal. So when you think about dissent within the United States, when you think about people who disagree with the official narrative, what group of people do you think they're specifically targeting? Who do you think they'll be coming after? Do you think your preparedness group might be on the list of people they would be concerned about? I would say yes, because anyone who doesn't need the government, anyone who has a level of self-reliance where the government is no longer needed in any form of assistance is going to be considered a threat. Because when you don't need the government, you also don't necessarily need to comply with the government. Isn't that interesting? So here's some things to watch out for right now when it comes to the possibility of secret police. Look, this has been happening for a long time in this country. This happens all over the world. And we saw activities even back during the riots in Portland in 2020 where unmarked vehicles were taking people away. Now, regardless of how you feel about that situation, that is the activity that you would usually associate with something like a secret police force, right? Well, here we are. And honestly, with the internet and the NSA and the ability to surveil Americans at will, we don't need the same kind of denunciations from our peers in order to be ratted out. The internet does a lot of that work for them at this point in time. So a lot of this activity is already occurring, of course. But the reason I'm making you aware of it is because it seems like the stage is being set to smoke out any dissenters. And I think that there might be a trap happening right now when it comes to political ideologies and forcing people out of their caves, let's just say, to reveal themselves for who they truly are in order to begin the process of removing dissent from the equation. This concerns me. It should definitely concern you as well. And back during, let's just say, 1930s, 40s, and 50s Germany, a lot of what people did was they either hid, they changed their identity, or they avoided it completely. And that was really the only ways to avoid being messed with when it came to dealing with a secret police state, because back then, at that point, it had already been developed to the degree of not ever coming back. So you have to keep in mind that one of the only other options you have here in the United States is to prevent it from ever happening in the first place. I don't know how we do that, but what I'm trying to say here is that this is a concern you should have, and this is something you should be watching out for. And a big part of removing dissent from the equation is removing people's ability to trust each other. And that's a lot of what happened during that gaslighting, right? They would change people's time on their clocks, they would change people's furniture around, they would prevent them from getting promotions at work, they would let air out of their tires, they would do all kinds of things in a personal way that made people feel like the only way this could have possibly happened was from somebody I trusted, somebody within my inner circle, somebody who lived in my home, because there's no way anyone else could have done these things to me, right? And that removed trust, which then removed the ability for people to organize and build community and get together and share a similar concept. So understand that that's a lot of what's happening right now. We're being prevented from organizing in many ways. And that's what you're going to see here when it comes to some of this possible events that could occur coming out of the FBI right now. I'm concerned about it. You should be concerned about it. I wanted to bring this message to you all because it's important. And honestly, I just couldn't post that other video because I think it's good that we have these conversations and have this intelligence sharing that we have here, because without it, we might be even more out of luck.